You're a kid, you walk in, and a person hands you a plate, a clean, empty plate, and then they point you toward a room that, to a child, may as well be the edge of the known universe. Steam rising off metal trays as far as you can see, fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, mashed potatoes sitting next to a lake of gravy, rolls, jello in colors that do not occur in nature, and then the Holy Grail, over in the corner, a machine that pours soft serve ice cream, and nobody on this earth is going to stop you from pulling that lever as many times as you want. This was Old Country Buffet, and for millions of American families, this was the best night of the week. There were once more than 600 of these places. Today, there are essentially none. The entire empire of unlimited mashed potatoes is just gone. And the story of how it vanished is really the story of how a whole way of eating quietly went extinct. Let me show you. Start with the question that should have always bugged you as a kid. How on earth did this place make any money? They let you eat unlimited food, as much as your body could physically hold, for about $9. A growing kid, a starving teenager, your uncle who treated the whole thing like a personal dare, all of them eating without limit for the price of a movie ticket. Sounds like a business deliberately designed to lose money. It wasn't. The buffet is one of the quietly most brilliant machines in all of food. It runs on a few pieces of cold math. First, you are the staff. There are no waiters taking your order, nobody running plates out from the kitchen. You get up, you serve yourself, you clear your own table halfway. That single fact strips out the biggest cost in a normal restaurant before you've even sat down. Second, and this is the heart of it, they quietly control the order in which you fill up. Look at where the cheap stuff sits. The rolls, the pasta, the rice, the mashed potatoes, the salad, the drinks, the things that cost the kitchen pennies and fill you up the fastest are everywhere, right up front, easy to reach. The expensive things, the carved roast beef, the shrimp, are smaller, tucked toward the end, often with an employee standing there portioning them out for you. By the time you reach the food that actually costs them money, you have already built a mountain out of 60 cents of carbohydrates. You filled yourself up on the cheapest possible ingredients, and you felt like royalty doing it. Third, the law of averages. Yes, your uncle ate $40 of food for $9, but the table next to him was a young family whose two kids picked at some mac and cheese and a grandma with a small plate and a cup of coffee. Spread across hundreds of people a day, it evens out. The buffet does not need to win on every single customer, it only needs to win on average. The light eaters quietly pay for the heavy ones. But here is the thing about this machine, the thing that matters most for our story. It is incredibly fragile. It only works when the place is packed. All that food has to be cooked in enormous batches and kept hot and kept looking abundant all day long, whether 10 people walk in or 1,000. When the crowds come, the math is beautiful. When the crowds thin out, even a little, that glorious wall of fresh food turns into a wall of money getting scraped straight into the garbage at closing time. A full buffet is a gold mine. A half-empty buffet is a bonfire. Hold on to that because it's how this story ends. The man who built the empire was named Roe Hatlin. In 1983 in Minnesota, he and a partner opened the first Old Country Buffet with an idea that was almost wholesome in its simplicity. Good, home-style American food, as much as you want, at a price any family could afford. No pretension, just abundance. And it caught fire. Hatlin even engineered a clever fix for the crowds. Most buffets back then funneled everyone into one single file line. Old Country Buffet broke the food up into separate islands scattered around the room, so the crowd could flow in every direction at once and never jam up. They called it the scatter system, and it let them push more happy, full people through the doors than anybody else. By the late 1990s, there were more than 250 Old Country Buffets, and the company behind them would eventually run over 600 restaurants nationwide. For a while, it was the biggest buffet company in America. On any given Sunday after church, these places were absolutely packed. The machine was humming. And then, like so many of these stories, Wall Street showed up. Around the year 2000, a couple of private equity firms bought Old Country Buffet's parent company and took it private. And they ran a familiar playbook. They loaded the company up with borrowed money and then used that borrowed money to pay themselves enormous dividends. At one point, One of the firms put in around $130 million and pulled back out $142 million in under 2 years. They had already made their money back, and the company was now the one holding the loans. Then, in 2006, came the big swing. The company took on a mountain of fresh debt, around $800 million of it, to buy its biggest rival, Ryan's, and crown itself the largest buffet chain in the nation. On paper, total domination. In reality, they had just bolted an enormous weight onto a machine that, remember, only works when the crowds are full. The timing could not possibly have been worse, because the very next year, the world started to come apart. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, families stopped eating out. And the fragile buffet machine did exactly what a fragile buffet machine does when the crowd's thin. It began to bleed. Crushed under that $800 million in debt, with fewer and fewer people coming through the doors, the company filed for bankruptcy in 2008, then again in 2012, then again in 2016. Each time, more locations went dark, often overnight, without warning. And underneath the debt, something slower and sadder was happening. America was falling out of love with the buffet itself. A new kind of place was rising. Fast casual spots where the food felt fresher and the line moved quick. Taste drifted toward quality over sheer quantity. The all-you-can-eat buffet started to feel like a relic, a little tired, a little downscale. The sneeze guards, the heat lamps, the faintly sticky tray rails. The thing that once felt like pure abundance started for a lot of people to feel like a place that had seen better days. And as the crowds thinned, the company cut costs to survive, which made the food worse, which thinned the crowds even more. The machine had started eating itself. But it staggered on, wounded, shrinking but alive, and then came the one event in modern history that seemed almost custom designed to kill it. In March 2020, the pandemic arrived. And stop and think for a second about what a buffet actually is. It is a room full of strangers, walking up to shared open trays of food, handling the same serving spoons, leaning over the same pan of lasagna all day long. In a pandemic that wasn't just risky, almost overnight it became the single most unthinkable way to eat a meal on planet Earth. Governments didn't just restrict it, they banned self-serve buffets outright. They didn't slow the business down, they made the entire business model illegal. For a chain already hanging on by a thread, drowning in a decade of old debt, starved of the crowds it desperately needed, there was simply no surviving that. The doors closed in March 2020. A few locations made a sad little attempt to reopen by handing out prepackaged plates, which is a buffet with its soul surgically removed. It didn't work. And in January of 2021, it became official. Every remaining Old Country buffet and all its sister chains closed for good. The fixtures were auctioned off. The soft serve machines and the metal trays and the sneeze guards sold to the highest bidder. So what happened to Old Country Buffet? It got squeezed from every side at once. A beautiful, fragile machine that only ever worked when it was full, slowly starved of the crowds it lived on, loaded with debt by owners who pulled their own money out early, left behind by a country that had decided it wanted something faster, fresher, fancier, and then finished off by a pandemic that turned its single greatest feature, all of us eating together from the same table, into the exact thing that killed it. But here's what I think we actually lost, and it's bigger than a restaurant. The buffet was never really about the food. The food was never really the point. It was a place where for $9 a family that did not have much could walk in and feel rich, where a kid could build a plate however he wanted, where there was always more, where the only promise was abundance. It was unpretentious, a little goofy, and it belonged to everybody. Drive past one of those buildings now, the ones that haven't already been turned into something else, and you can still make out the shape of it. The long, low roof, the wide windows, the big empty parking lot that used to be full every single Sunday afternoon. The lights are off, the trays are gone, and a certain kind of American evening, the kind where the only limit was how many trips back you were brave enough to make, went quietly extinct. I still can't draw, but now you know what happened to Old Country Buffet.